Hi everyone, welcome to another exciting edition of Words, Images, and Worlds. I am glad on this episode to be talking with Gabriel Hardman, comics creator, writer, and artist as well. And I believe you've also worked in the world of film, is that right? Are you
Yeah,
the
yeah. I mean,
Gabriel? Yeah.
that's a big part of my career. Yes.
Yes, yes. Yeah. I was making sure that Google was not lying to me because I know your work in
Oh
comics
yeah, yeah, yeah.
best.
Right. Yeah. No, I've been a storyboard artist storyboard artist, illustrator, and other things in films since the mid '90s. The first movie I worked on was Austin Powers, and I'm the
Oh, nice.
last movie that came out that I worked on is Indiana Jones, Dial of Destiny.
Oh, nice, nice. Yeah, yeah. Very cool. Very cool work. And glad to talk to someone who's connected to the International Man of Mystery as well.
Sure. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
was too connected to Austin Powers at a certain point in my early career.
Yeah. Um, so I'll actually mention a different set of titles because, as I said, I know you're working comics best, but we could talk visual work sort of
I
in general.
Please let's talk about comics.
Yes.
The thing about talking about comics is that for the most part, I mean that is the work I've chosen to do and was passionate about doing, and and telling stories that I'm interested in.
Hmm.
The
Hmm.
film work is, I've contributed a lot to these films, but I don't choose the project. So like,
Yeah.
it's not me directly being creative in that way.
Yeah. Yeah.
Comics are.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So, a lot of the work that I know you for would be stuff like Cursed Comics Cavalcade, which is fun to
Okay.
say.
You
Yeah,
sure? Yeah.
yeah, yeah. The work that you've done in the Aliens world.
Hmm.
Yeah. Work on Batman, Planet of the Apes,
Right.
Hulk, of
Sure.
course.
That was back when I drew that and Jeff Parker wrote it. The other ones
Hmm.
are things that I wrote as well as drew.
Hmm. Hmm. Star Wars Legacy.
Yeah, yeah. That was a fun project.
Yeah. And then you've also done, I think it was cover art for an issue of The Shadow, and I just love the
I'm
pulp
sure that
comics
that's
as well.
true. I mean, I'm a big fan of the Shadow, and I mean, at least I'm a big fan of that kind of 1930s and 40s pulp world, and I I really wanted to do a Shadow book, and but it was too difficult to negotiate with the publisher. They basically just the publisher of the Shadow Comics is a little bit it's a smaller publisher and they have the license, and we couldn't quite work out a deal. But I would have loved to do that,
Yeah.
to do a whole
Yeah.
book.
Yeah. I'm up for that character anytime, and
Yeah.
pretty diverse in my interests and pretty diverse in what I like to read. So curious about the world of visual storytelling and what connected you there. Was it comics that sort of brought you in?
It was everything. I had I grew up as a fan of comics, and I had started very seriously trying to get to work in comics and to do samples and sending them to editors when I was 14 years old. So like uh I took it seriously. Like I was interested in the form, right? I mean, as much
Mm-hmm.
as a teenager can really take things seriously. I mean, but you can, and I did. And at the time it was the late 80s, early 90s, and I was drawing sample pages and sending them off to editors, um like that I found like you know uh in a book called like Artist Market at the time. Like there was
Mm-hmm.
there weren't it wasn't as accessible back then, to find out who to send things to and stuff like that. And then I also was always a huge movie fan and became a huge classic movie fan in my late teens. Huge devotee of Alfred Hitchcock, and Alfred Hitchcock, this French director Francois Truffaut did an interview book with Alfred Hitchcock, and in it Hitchcock talked a lot about his like ideas about visual storytelling, and a lot of that, while film and comics are very, very different media in the way that they present things,
Mm-hmm.
like those central concepts were really important to me, even from a really early age. Even, I mean, I'm sure I was not really able to like, uh, put that into effect until a lot later. But
Mhm.
these thoughts were always uh, something that I, uh, worked through the art, worked through the, even early on. And so it's always been about, I mean, visual storytelling for me has always been about just, progression of images, choosing the images that are telling the story, being true to that, not being shallowly stylish, but doing the thing that will best tell the story.
Yeah, yeah. Now, you mentioned the affinity for comics, and I'm curious what comics allow you to do in telling a story versus film.
Well, I mean, the practical aspect of it is that I can make an entire comic by myself in my house. I mean, and it even with the sort of democratization of technology, the it costs money to make a film, and no matter what. So, it's something it's just eminently possible to make a comic and follow a story is that I'm passionate about that I don't know if anybody else is passionate about. I don't have to go around and raise money to make a comic. There's a horror comic of mine, a creator-owned horror comic of mine called The Belfry that was like a one-shot comic that I just drew because I
Mhm.
felt like it. And I finished everything about it. It was prepped to go to the printer, and then I had a relationship with Image Comics at the time. I was publishing another book through them, and I just wrote to the publisher and I was like, "Hey, I've got this one-shot book. I don't know if you publish one-shots or not, and but it's done. It could go to the printer today." And he was like, "Great," and it got published. It was a lot of people responded to it well, and that was totally a surprise to me because it was very different than the other work that I did.
Mhm.
But I just had the passion to do it, and I did it, and that's not as much something that you can do in film, although a little bit more now than you could in the past.
But it sounds like you can take creative risks in that way. So if it's something
Absolutely.
that,
That's a
if it's
huge part of it.
different,
Huge
yeah.
part of it. And I like trying things that might fail, and particularly in comics, there's a window for doing that kind of thing without losing all your money or, whatever, like I can try things that go out on a limb creatively, go out on a limb as, with storytelling choices in ways that you couldn't if you were spending a lot of money. As far as the formal aspects of comics, it's I think it's really like I mean, it is a very different form than film is, and is a little bit more like poetry. You're choosing the words and images in a very spare way,
Hmm. Hmm.
because you simply have a relatively a limited amount of space. And even though visual storytelling in film is about the juxtaposition of images, like the fundamentals of film are editing and creating a third idea by putting two pieces of film together. The same thing that fundamental thing is the same in comics. You know, like each page is a unit, but each panel is a unit within the page, and so the juxtaposition of two different panels together to create like a bigger idea between the cut is like the most fundamental part of visual storytelling. Also, like the most one of the exciting things about it. I mean, uh, as you can probably tell, what doesn't really excite me is drawing big, splash pages of superheroes and stuff, right? Like
Right,
I'm
right.
interested in telling a story. I'm interested in the mechanics of it, and but also using those mechanics to tell stories that I'm passionate about.
Yeah, yeah. So you mentioned Belfry there. Any other particular works that you've done that you look back on fondly and those kind of positive experiences where you've done something creatively and you felt like you sort of made your mark?
Well, I mean, the one of them for me is, I mean, not necessarily my most popular book, but one of the things for me is I did a graphic novel called Kinski that came out about 10 years ago now, and it's a personal story. It's a sort of a quirky genre story. It's a black and white comic. It's about you know a guy who steals a dog and feels like it's a kind of self-righteous quest, and then it kind of ruins his life. And but it it's that's not everything. So and it's a book that that I feel like the people who responded to it just got exactly what I was going for with the book, right? And and it's a much more delicate thing. It's not really a genre story, even though it
Hmm.
has some genre elements to it. It's not something, it's less accessible and less of something uh that that people have an instant buy-in for, the way that you do with Aliens or something else. So I just like that's certainly the book that is most personal to me and that I'm most proud of.
So you mentioned the ability to sort of create a comic and a story in your house if you want to. I know that comics and film are both also collaborative media. So just curious about the best people that you've met in the comics industry so far and the ingredients for kind of a successful collaboration.
Well, I mean, the as far as I mean, a successful collaboration is about being able to share certain creative sensibilities and also for other people to bring in different elements of those creative sensibilities and that you don't have. And the and also uh it's I mean, but there's a practical element to it too. I mean, it's about people who you can work with well and who will deliver
Hmm.
the work and and actually are responsible about it, and you have but and that doesn't last forever either. You have creative partners that you work with for periods of time and then you just kind of grow out of each other over over a period of time. And but I do think, I mean, one thing for me about comics is that it is primarily me doing the work. Like there are things
Hmm.
that there
Hmm.
were several books in the past that I co-wrote, but even in those circumstances, I was the primary person. And so I'm writing and drawing it. I'm making huge decisions that, the script is not even, uh, the thing about comics is their storytelling in comics is writing and drawing, right? The
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
like writing isn't storytelling and then drawing is illustrating that story. That's not how it works. Like
Right.
you're telling the story uh, as the artist and telling the story as the writer. And so the only thing that really interests me in comics is doing both of those things. Like because the challenge is to kind of holistically tell the story. Just working with another writer doesn't like challenge me or interest me in that way, and I haven't for a decade.
Hmm.
So it's like uh my passion is that combination of things. So like it is kind of like the absolutely colorists and letterers have been important, and but and editors to an extent, but but like the going out on a limb, sinking or swimming, making the choices on your own, that people like or don't like. It's an
Hmm.
important part of comics. I mean, it's closer to novels in that way, I think.
Nice, nice. Yeah, and I imagine the creative freedom that offers is very enticing in its own way.
It is. I mean, there's creative freedom because there's no money. I mean, like there's very little money. And, but it also doesn't cost a lot to make a comic. I mean, it costs my time,
Hmm.
but at least in the past, I've managed to basically support myself through my film work and then, I'm not going broke on comics. I'm not losing money on comics, but they don't, there's not a lot of money to be made there either. It's,
Hmm.
it's about the accessibility of, telling stories you want to tell.
Yeah, yeah. So with that in mind, any particular stories that you're circling around right now that you want to share about, can share about, or particular creative directions that you'd like to head in?
Well, I'm working on a comic that it's like I'm calling it a comic strip. It's it's like a kind of noirish crime story set in Hollywood in 1947. And I'm just going to be serializing it on my Patreon, which is Gabriel Hardman art. And I mean, eventually it'll be a book, but my intent with it. I've gotten really interested in newspaper comic strips from the like 30s and 40s particularly,
Mhm.
and well, actually into the 50s, Rip Kirby. But like and you know I don't know, it's just a very particular, interesting, different form that doesn't relate exactly to comics. And I've for years I've kind of wanted to try that out, and so I've been working on that. People can see some panels of it and examples of it on my social media, and I'm going to be like properly starting it early February.
Mhm. Mhm.
And it's called Below the Line. It's and really I'm a huge fan of the crime genre and certainly noir films, although I never quite want to tell a story unless it has a personal element to it. But the but like uh but I've never properly done like a crime comic before, and this is a black and white kind of very atmosphere drenched comic that also can be a little goofy, but the but and set very much in a world that I'm interested in, like the post World War II era in Hollywood, and it's about a publicity agent who colossally screws up a, a situation where he's supposed to kind of go in and clean up after something went very wrong with a star. Like he works for the studio. He comes in to kind of help smooth things over and clean up and interact with the press and stuff. But it all goes very, very wrong and loses his
Uh,
job and kind of ends up in the lowest rungs of show business until somebody comes along and basically hires him to try to figure out what was really going on that night when everything went wrong. And so he becomes kind of a quasi amateur detective that's sort of investigating the thing that kind of ruined his life, but there's more to it.
Interesting, interesting. Looking forward to seeing that out. And I appreciate the comic strip medium. I was a person that read the Sunday funnies and things like that, and they weren't
Sure.
always that funny. But
Yeah, well,
yeah.
but that's the thing. Like, it's not, I mean, what it used to be, it used to be an incredibly popular mainstream medium, like because everybody had access to the newspaper, right? Like,
Mhm.
and anybody would read the newspaper, and there used to be serialized adventure strips and dramatic strips and soap opera type strips and all that sort of stuff. And it was, I mean, it was just a very different thing. I mean, if you read interviews with Orson Welles, he talks about being inspired by Milton Caniff's Terry and the Pirates,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
and this, certainly the film and comic strips were sort of in a dialogue, inspiring each other at the time. It was just a very, very different thing, and comic strips were, I mean, while comic books were extraordinarily popular, particularly during World War II when they sold the millions. Comic strips were something on a different level. The cartoonists were celebrities, and they were
Mhm.
more of a it was more of a mainstream thing than something that was just considered for kids. And I'm just taking inspiration from that. It doesn't have anything to do with, I mean, that was part of the distribution. It doesn't have anything to do with now, but I've just taken a lot of inspiration from those books or those
Yeah.
strips, right?
Very cool, very cool. And so I think my final question would be places where people can connect and follow online with what you're doing, including the project that's about to launch.
Um, I'm uh, I'm Gabriel Hardman on X, Twitter, whatever. Like, I don't really use it anymore, but I will update things that are important from there. I'm Gabriel Hardman on Blue Sky, which I do use more, although it's like a tiny little room that nobody's in. And Gabriel Hardman art on Instagram and Threads, and Gabriel Hardman art on Patreon, where I'll be serializing both this strip, and also showing I'll be sharing uh art from projects that from comics projects that didn't happen for one reason or another in the past. I don't have another really place to put them. I'll share storyboards from movies over the course of my career, things that didn't happen or sequences from famous movies and stuff like that. So there'll be a bunch of stuff like that when I actually launch it.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, Gabriel, thank you for the time. Thank you for the
Sure.
work, and looking forward to the work that is on the way as well.
Cool. Well, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.